Good evening and welcome to episode 14 of Fracking Nightmare. Now tonight we're going to try and vary the show as much as possible. We will be talking about the frontline activities at Barton Moss. I shall also be taking the opportunity to introduce Bear, who viewers may recall that last week he was unable to join us due to the fact that he was enjoying the hospitality of the Greater Manchester Police. More of that a little bit later. But also we'll be looking at a new campaign that's just about to be launched in the West Wirral, in West Kirby in fact, where we'll be looking at what occurred on Saturday at a public meeting there to address the issue of underground coal gasification, which I refer to as fracking's ugly sister. Now, last week I mentioned Chief Superintendent Mark Roberts. Now, Chief Superintendent Mark Roberts is the gold commander for the Barton Moss operation. Now, to the best of my knowledge, Chief Superintendent Mark Roberts has never actually set foot on Barton Moss Road, certainly not in the time that the protection community has taken up residence there. Yet, he appears to be very well informed. But where is he getting his information from? Because he is putting out press releases that are totally fallacious. I will quote one of his recent press releases where he said, "At the start of this protest, the majority of protesters were peaceful and law-abiding. But over the past couple of weeks, local residents and officers have seen a distinct change to this. It now seems that the majority of people who are arriving at the site are not there to protest against fracking, but are there to disrupt and intimidate the local community and to antagonize police." Mr. Roberts said that the force had recorded offences of assault, damage, harassment of residents and workers, a flare fired at the police helicopter, and threats to kill. He says, "I attended a residents' meeting last week and people there were close to tears and have had enough of this daily disruption to their lives." He continues, "Locals who initially supported the protesters out walking their dogs and driving down Barton Moss Road have been approached by protesters in balaclavas and have been questioned by them, which has been extremely intimidating. We have seen a huge increase in calls to police from that area, and this is continuing. Chief Inspector Mark Roberts, you are either misinformed or you are deliberately slandering the protection community. You have already been served with freedom of information requests to provide the video evidence from the police evidence gatherers to support your claim that the past couple of weeks has seen protesters go from being peaceful to antagonistic. This is absolutely not the case. What we have seen is Greater Manchester police officers becoming increasingly antagonistic and literally living in their own alternate reality. Probably the most extreme case of this that has come to light in recent days is the video footage recorded by a legal observer who was falsely accused of being drunk in the morning and having driven to the camp that morning. Now, let's have a look at the footage here. But what I want you to do, while watching the footage, listen very carefully to what the legal observer, Steve, actually says to the antagonistic evidence gatherer. Now, this is an inspector in the evidence gathering team. What you will hear is the evidence gatherer persistently claim that Steve has had a drink. Steve states that he has drunk nothing but tea. The evidence gatherer then tells one of his fellow officers that Steve has admitted to him that he has had a drink that morning. Watch this, and then I will tell you what happened when the case actually came to court.
with that.
Can you rejoin the line, please?
So you have to say, mate. Do me a favour.
Line now, please.
Get part of the protest group. This chap needs to get.
Come on, we've got a legal observer there.
You've got one. You need to go over there, other side of that map, over there. Get over there. You're part of that group.
You're assaulting me, please.
I'm not assaulting you. I'm moving you, and I'm helping you into that line. I could arrest you, but I'm not going to arrest you. So it's in your benefit. Are you drunk? You've been drinking this morning? You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You've been drinking?
I've had tea.
You've arrived in your car?
No, I've not.
You've arrived in your car this morning? You've had a drink, haven't you? You've had a drink this morning. Where's your car? Been drinking this morning?
No, I've not.
You just said to me you've had 2 drinks.
No, I've not.
You just said that you've had 2 drinks.
I've got it on camera.
Yeah, you just said to me you've had 2 drinks.
No,
I can
I've not.
smell alcohol in your breath and you've come in a car.
No,
when
I've
did you
not.
have your drinks this morning?
Am I being arrested, officer?
No, I'm making inquiries, Steve, you're unfit. Hey, Stephen, will you listen to me? Listen to me. Just get the... Not going anywhere. You've been detained at this moment in time. Have you got this lad that's coming in the car this morning? I can smell alcohol on his breath. He's already admitted to having a drink.
No. I've got it on
so-
film.
Yeah,
I've not had a
that's
drink
fine.
at all. I've had tea this morning, officer.
You've got two officers. Yeah, and we'll...
We've lost quite most
Have
of
you?
mine. I've gone down watching M3.
Right.
I've lost most of my cereal.
Okay, your car is down there, Stephen, is it not? Your blue Mercedes. Where have you had a drink this morning?
I have not. I've told you. I've had tea this morning.
Daniel, can you go and join that group, please?
Yeah, I've literally just woke up, mate.
Yeah, can you go and join that group, please? You're going to put there, you know what it is? Stephen's had a drink this morning.
No, I've not. I had tea this morning. You can check with the whole camp.
Here you go. When have you had a drink?
Am I arrested?
Can you, and he's under arrest.
Why are you shouting at me?
Because you're mithering me.
Am I being detained?
You're detained this moment in time to ascertain whether or not you've been drink driving. It's as simple as that. I can smell alcohol in your breath. And we're going to walk down there. And do you consent to a roadside breath test?
No.
You don't?
No.
Right then. I'm going to stop here. Just come to this wagon here. I'm going to...
Am I under arrest?
You're detained. It's as simple as that. You're detained.
Am I under arrest?
You're detained.
Am I under arrest?
You are detained for this purpose.
It's a simple question.
Have you got in there? Yeah, you are detained. Have you got any staff in there? Have you got a breath kit in there? Right. You're detained for just 1 minute.
I'm a pedestrian on a public
we've got a
footpath.
breath kit here.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Just get 2 staff here.
I'm a
They're
pedestrian.
going to go through the drink drive procedure with you.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
Okay. Short officers here.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
You've also been drinking and you've
I'm a
also come in your
pedestrian.
car this morning.
I'm a
So,
pedestrian on a
look this.
public footpath.
Got 2 gents here, and can you go through? This chap has arrived in the car this morning. He's been drinking. Can you go through the drink drive procedure with him? Because I suspect that he's arrived here drunk in a car this morning. So we go through that process. There's a breath kit over there. You're all right with that? One other officer just stays with this chap here because he's been quite vociferous this morning.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath, officer.
Believe that you've been driving here.
Well, you would need to locate a motor vehicle then to prove that.
You're right to go through that procedure.
So I'm going to carry out a roadside breathalyzer procedure.
I've not been driving, officer, so I've no reason
I've been
to.
informed you have. So I'm going to ask you to provide a specimen of breath.
I'm a pedestrian on a public footpath.
I'm going
You
to
have
ask
not.
you to
You
provide a
have
specimen
not.
of breath.
You have not detained me behind a wheel, officer.
You don't have to be behind the wheel. If we suspect you've been driving whilst drinking,
At this moment in time, we're only asking you to provide a specimen of breath.
What for? I'm not driving.
You're not under arrest. If you refuse to provide a specimen of
breath, you will be arrested if you
you'll be
fail to provide a
arrested. It is
specimen
an
of
offence
breath.
to refuse to provide. Do you consent to provide a specimen of breath
I
for
do
analysis?
not consent.
Okay, you do not consent. Just confirm that.
I do not consent.
not
I'm going to ask you again that
6698. I do not consent because I am not driving. I'm on a public footpath.
you don't need to be driving. It's suspicious you've driven here whilst under the influence of alcohol.
You're required to provide a specimen.
I'm on a public footpath. I'm being detained
It's a highway.
unlawfully.
It's a highway.
It's a public footpath.
Okay.
There are signs at the top of the road I can point out to you.
Are you going to provide a specimen of breath?
I am not driving.
Are you going to provide a specimen of breath analysis?
I am not
is your last
driving.
opportunity. You'll be arrested.
Failure to provide a specimen of breath will render you liable to.
If I gave you a specimen of breath,
yeah.
I'm not driving. I'm not committing any kind of offence.
Yes or no?
Right.
You're going to provide a specimen,
These are your two options. You could consent to provide a specimen of breath for analysis. You've been seen driving this morning. We suspect you've been drinking.
Absolutely not. That's a lie, officer. That's a lie, officer.
You cannot provide.
That's a lie, officer.
You cannot consent to provide a specimen of breath. If you do not consent, this is your last warning. You will be arrested for failing to provide a specimen of breath. Do you consent to provide a specimen
I
of
do
breath?
not consent to provide a specimen
You're
of breath.
under arrest for failing to provide a specimen of breath. You don't have to say anything that may harm your defence and mention when questioned something which later in court. Anything you do.
So, Chief Superintendent Mark Roberts, I hope you're impressed there by the behaviour of one of the inspectors amongst your evidence gathering team at Barton Moss, who clearly has the capacity to fabricate reality. Now, what happened when it came to court a few days ago? The prosecution is not satisfied that there is sufficient evidence to substantiate the charge. Therefore, we withdraw the case. Clerk of the Court, do you understand that the prosecution is withdrawing its case? Freeman, no, I do not understand, but I do comprehend. Magistrate, whether you understand or you comprehend, you are free to go. The case is dismissed, because the prosecution has withdrawn the case. End of. What we witnessed in that piece of footage was a prima facie example of police intimidation. This, unfortunately, has been the characterisation of the Barton Moss campaign. Peaceful protectors not being policed by Greater Manchester Police with a desire to facilitate peaceful protest, but with a desire to facilitate the corporate agenda, with a desire to intimidate the protectors, with a desire to intimidate the local population from coming down to Barton Moss Road to support the protectors. But as we have seen in this past week, the local support for the Barton Moss protection community is increasing exponentially as people in the community realise that they have been told half-truths, lies, and been subjected to deceit and obfuscation over the past 3.5 years by iGas. As people now do their own research, they are beginning to realise the magnitude of what the potential danger is to their delicate environment on the Mosses. Just last week, Frack Free Earlham and Cadishead had its very first meeting in the Nag's Head pub. The organisers of that meeting were absolutely staggered by the response. The room was packed solid, and by the end of the evening, people had committed to joining the campaign to raise awareness amongst their fellow residents. This is a very different demographic from Balcombe. Very different indeed. It's taken perhaps a little longer for people to comprehend that this is not industrialisation as they have experienced industrialisation in the past. This is unleashing something that will potentially destroy the environment for future generations. So, iGas, you are being served notice. Oh, talking of which, you have also been served notice and that you are expected to cease drilling, considering that you do not have the appropriate waste permits for the disposal of mining waste. Now, you are trying obviously to do everything you possibly can to keep the drilling process going, having claimed that it would be too expensive to stop. So much for your social responsibility. So much for your concern for the environment, that you are now trying to browbeat the Environment Agency and say, well, we're just not going to stop, period. Well, let's see how that plays out. But meanwhile, we ask people right across the country to take a much closer look at the risk to your community. Remember, 64% of this country is now up for grabs by the oil and gas industry, and within the space of a decade, this country could literally be turned into a barren wasteland. Join me in part 2.
If you take an active interest in maintaining the optimum health and well-being of yourself and your family, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is the magazine you've been waiting for. Having taken Australia and New Zealand by storm, the New Zealand Journal of Natural Medicine is now available in the UK and Europe. Visit www.nznaturalmed.co.uk or call 01626 337 531 to order your copy now.
I do not stand under you, I merely comprehend what you have said to me.
Okay, so that was Bear being taken into the custody of the Greater Manchester Police by the Tactical Unit, of course otherwise known as THUS. So that unfortunately prevented Bear from joining us last week, but I'm pleased to say Bear is with us this week. So welcome to Fracking Nightmare.
Oh, thank you, Ian. I'm really glad to be on the show this week, finally.
So come on, give us the insight. How was your treatment or the hospitality of the police?
To be fair, they were very polite. They were very gentle in many ways, though I will say I think I flummoxed them quite a bit because obviously Thugs R Us are more used to a guy of my size kicking off, and I think they were very surprised by my very response to my arrest. It was a strange one. I've never been arrested before from all my years of acting, and it was very intriguing to be on the other end of the spectrum. And I will say this, though, that very slaying experience. And I venture the opinion that there were a bit of mind games being played in the old prison cells with the, oh, we're letting you out immediately, 2 hours later. Oh, sorry, there's been a confusion, let you out immediately. And then this just kept dragging on and on and on. It wasn't a pleasant experience, I'll say that much.
Not one that you're in a hurry to repeat.
Oh, never, to be honest. Still, I will state as well that categorically I don't think there was any need for my arrest or the arrest that led to my arrest, from which you can see from the video.
Well, and I think that what we're going to see anyway is that after Thursday's situation, where of course the police didn't show up and the protection camp escorted the convoy to the gates of the iGas compound in about 2 hours and escorted in about 2 hours. But what that video footage clearly demonstrates is that the police are effectively superfluous to rights. And consequently, they don't need to, and when they are there, unfortunately, things seem to kick off. So, use your own judgment. What's the common denominator?
Oh, yeah.
I think we're probably going to see a lot of these cases dropped before they actually go file, and I'm sure that you'll be amongst them.
Yeah, well, I hope so, and I'm pretty sure it will be too, Ian, yeah.
Good, well, anyway, so you're going to be a regular guest on Fracking Nightmare, and I really appreciate you offering to step up to the plate here. So, as I've said, Bear, you are a graduate in petroleum geology, although I gather you've never actually practiced in anger.
No, not at all. I had a conscience of faith and morality at the end of my degree and decided it really wasn't the industry for me.
Yeah, it took years to have that attack of conscience. But between us, I mean, hopefully we have some interesting insights to share. So, Bear, obviously what I've done is given you sort of really and given you the opportunity to tell me that you want to each week. And this week you're going to talk us through some of the research that you've been doing into air pollution as a result of hydraulic fracturing.
Yeah, that's correct, Ian. Many people are aware of the potential hazards from groundwater pollution, but I feel that the air pollution is something that is often forgotten and sidelined when, in the brief research I've been able to do, and the shocking lack of professional research that's out there, but from that little data I found, there are a lot of problems that are potentially going to arise from the emissions that are going to come from any fracking site, and especially cumulatively with a lot of different fracking sites in one area.
There's not a lot of research out there, which of course is no surprise, and as we both know, the oil industry makes a habit of attempting to shut down any research that it becomes aware of, which might be damaging to its reputation. But share with us what you have come across. Right, well,
I've been looking at one of the things that really intrigued me was the data that the government tout as their justification, their background mission to show there have been studies done that adequate, provision put in place to understand the hazards from fracking. And I started looking through a variety of documents by many politicians. And the first one I went through came up with some very interesting parts. It's actually not about air emissions, but it does have a section that deals with it. And it was the view of potential health impacts of exposure to radioactive pollutants as a shale gas extraction. This was a report that was commissioned by Public Health England, which is an executive agency of the Department of Health, and it aims to ensure, this is from their website, everyone is protected from threats to their health, in this case from environmental and industrial hazards. Now, the initial report that I studied, it's focused exclusively on the impacts from releases of dangerous chemicals and compounds in the environment. Now, as this is one of the only health impact assessments done in the UK and commissioned by them, specifically dealing with the impact on people from the potential pollutants, I found it very, very strange that it didn't deal with any of the other issues, sustainability, the nuisance, noise, odours. It's a very, very narrow and restricted range, which varies pretty standard for a lot of these studies. And one thing I'll stress as well is this study is a paper study. For those of listening that don't know, that a paper study in essence is just a study that's compiled from existing studies. And once you start looking into this mountain of paper that supposedly supports the pro-fracking lobby, you realise that it's just put on top of more paper, and more paper till you get down to the fossilised coal beds, more or less, of the fracking paper in, fracking paper mountain.
And often it's academics that are using the work of their own pet academics.
Oh yeah, totally, yeah,
scratching each other's back, effectively.
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, like I'll go into some of the details around. I'll give you some background about the actual study first, and then I'll jump into the actual specific air emissions. I mean, the study itself. It cites quite a lot of other studies that have been done, as I say, it's a paper study. The three that it cites from England was the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research, which was done in 2011, the House of Commons Committee, which was once again in 2011, and the Royal Society and Royal Academy of Engineering in 2012. Now, these are spoken about by politicians saying, oh, these studies have been done, we know the risks and what have you like that, but, I mean, just segments I pulled out of them were all three include potential health and environmental impact associated with shale gas extraction, and there is a high need for appropriate regulations of all shale gas extraction, environmental monitoring before, during and after fracking, and improved analytical techniques to detect chemicals in frac fluid and flow back waters. Now, I mean, that is an obvious recommendation. It's something that we, as the anti-fracking lobby, are saying. I mean, this is pulled out saying that the right systems are in place. Once you start digging, as I'll show with the air emissions, there are no industry standards. There are no actual systems that have been used, let alone monitoring equipment to deal with these issues. As I say, those were the three studies I've just mentioned that we've done in the UK. It also cites other studies. It cites several others, but these are three of the main ones. And with the European Commission covering environmental health and climate impacts. Now, this was 2012, submitted to the European Parliament, well, it was in 2012, submitted to the Parliament in 2011. And I'd just like to read you a small paragraph from this, because this really does, for me, set it out how shockingly lacking the information and studies are out there to actually, support or, for the pro or anti-lobby in any way, really. So the study authors duly acknowledge the this risk screening exercise, considering notably the systematic baseline monitoring in the US. which is where most of the literature sources come from. Lack of comprehensive and centralised data on well failure and incident rates, and the need for further research on a number of possible, including long-term. Now, this is the killer, this line. Because of the inherent uncertainty associated with the environment assessment studies, expert was used to categorise these effects. Basically means that they've taken one person's opinion with no hard data. And these are the studies that this study is in then turn based on, which should really give you the much fact really showing this study to us.
And the thing is that we don't even know whose opinion that study was based upon. So it could be any Joe working for the who's basically going to say whatever it is they want them to say for the report.
This is one of the biggest problems, isn't it, from a lot of the literature that comes from America that can't look into it, carried out, say, by a protection agency by the shale gas company, because they're the only people who have the money and the corporate responsibility, supposedly, to actually investigate this, which shows a complete vested interest and, you know, a bias, obviously, towards the industry in every way.
Well, US academia is even more reliant on corporate funding than it is in the UK. But
yes,
it's heading in that direction anyway.
Oh, totally, yeah. I saw that while I was at university, to be the wonderful names for local sponsors. Our library got called by the name of a local car dealership when I was leaving university, because he put in. I'll keep going anyway.
Please, yes.
Yeah, the other two studies that were cited in this about health impact, and as I say, these are the only major impact studies. There have been a lot of studies done about fracking. These are specifically dealing with health impact studies, so these to show the actual medical and health impacts and environmental impacts on those living in and around these. Now, the second one is the health impact assessment for the Colorado School of Public Health. I'm going to deal with this quite a lot later on in our little section, just because this is the one only, and I repeat, the only health impact study done in the world to date directly relating to air emissions. So that, just to give you an idea of that, that's the only one that's been done specifically for the petroleum industry as well. And then the other one is the New Brunswick, Canada Office of the Chief Medical Officer's Health Report, which once again, I'll just read out a little segment from that. Although health concerns are often noted as an important preoccupation among the public, there has been a notable lack of participation by public health agencies in many of the ongoing initiatives to regulate the industry, and furthermore, a complete lack of study of the possible health impacts. Now, so that should get, what I'm trying to do here is give you an idea of the actual information that this report's based on, and show the worrying lack of knowledge and lack of scientific study. So that's just giving you a bit of background of it. I'm going to go into the actual air quality now and the air emissions study, if that's okay, yeah?
Yep.
Right. So, as to date, there's been no UK studies undertaken by any key agency in the air emissions. Even though there has actually been a vertical hydraulic fracture, which I must stress is very different from horizontal high flow slicking fracturing that we're using today. This is a simple method of drill and fracture sideways, which is a lot less dangerous effects. But this has been operating since 1996 in Lancashire. As of today, there is no public data on any of the air emissions from this site, neither from the Priest Hall site as well. So the two classic examples the government has had to be able to monitor this and to actually get some background data hasn't been done. Now, but aside from that, there are many studies confirming release of emissions from shale gas, and the range of chemicals are quite horrifying in compounds when you start looking. You have nitrogen oxides, which for those that don't know are a precursor to ozone, which obviously a lot of people will have heard of. Ozone being a very detrimental compound, especially for greenhouse effects, but also it has a horrendous effect on respiratory systems and air quality in local areas. Methane, obviously, which will be released from it, and there has been footage shown of fracking sites where methane has been directly into the atmosphere. Once again, though not that harmful by itself, except as a suffocant, it has a lot of dangerous potentials for allowing other compounds to respiratory problems and other secondary conditions.
Well, and I think it's fair to say, Bear, isn't it, that actually there is no research into the effects of long-term exposure to methane.
Listen, I mean, I've been looking into something like this, and the only real studies that have ever been done are regards to faulty appliances, problems with me at home. But this doesn't take into account broad spectrum methane saturation over large geographies from the industry. Yeah, so it was a shocking gap in research that should have been done, at least by some health authorities somewhere out there. Further compounds and gases that can be released, you've got sulfur dioxide there, and most of us will know that from acid rain and the problems we've had during the late 20th century. Particulate matter, Now, this actually can be quite worrying as well. Particulate matter is small, fine-grained dust particles that will be released, and these can range from average subparticles to things like silica particles released from the fracking sands. Now, silica, if anybody knows, is a highly sharp and defined crystal. If that gets into the lung system, into any form of respiratory system, it's horrendous. And the final one, which I'll be dealing quite a lot with in the two little sections I've got further on in my volatile organic compounds. Now, these are things like benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene.
B-tex.
Now, yeah, B-tex for sure. Yeah, quite correct, Ian. Now, these are possibly some of the most dangerous compounds to come out there. The xylene, toluene, and ethylbenzene is very, very bad for respiratory problems. There's potential leukemia-forming compounds, and can have a lot of knock-on effects on the body's neurological systems, hematological systems, so your blood, your nervous system. But benzene is the worst of the lot, and to be fair, it's one that's going to be produced from fracking. And for sure, volatile organic compounds, VOCs, further on the report. But this is one that once again I was shocked when I realised that could be released from this, and also the potential health disorders. So I think benzene can prove to be directly responsible for 6 or 7 forms of leukemia, lymphocyte disorders. It's a horrendous compound, and something that we should not be wishing anywhere near our homes or our communities. So, as I say, I'll move on to now the One Health study that's been done, the Human Health Risk Assessment of Air Emissions from Development of Unconventional Natural Gas Resources. That was done by Professor McKenzie in 2012, based in Colorado. Now, this was not done off the back of any government institution. This was an area called Garfield County. They asked Colorado Public Health to assess the potential health impacts. Now, the thing was that at this point there was already a heavy fracking industry area, and the specific area they looked at was a town called Battlement Mesa, which is I think it's a population of about 5,000 people. But shockingly, the closest wells are within 150 meters of their property. So you imagine there's a very large community in what has been traditionally a very rural area up in the Rocky Mountains, and suddenly you have a heavy industry, more or less, if you look at the images, surrounding that community. Now, the study that was done used a hazard index, a HI index, which was the more potential exposure to a chemical or compound be, the higher the hazard index risk that there could be. Where a level of 1, so if you imagine these are tiny increments that go on, because the study was worked out over a 20-month and a 20-year period. I'm going to deal specifically with the 20-month part of that because it's quite a lot of data to go through, and that has enough data and enough information to really, try and set the point I'm putting out here. But as I say, so it's a level of 1 is an indicator of a danger or a risk to public health. Now, I'm going to put these in order of value. This is values for residents living less than half from a well. The increased risk of neurological disorders is a factor of 5. Hematological, 3. Respiratory, 2. And developmental, so, like birth complications, birth defects that could be passed on to unborn children, 1. So of all the areas looked by this study, an immediate danger to public health, and this is from, as I say, this is from a very limited study. And I mean, here, the levels, the area that's looked in, the only agriculture in this area before, this is the only heavy industry. At the monitoring station, the level of benzene, xylene were higher than 27 out of 37 American Environmental Protection Agency monitoring stations, and that's some in urban areas. If that isn't worrying, it's
unbelievable.
It is.
Obviously, this is by zone.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it's in the mountains. It's because it's only a population of 5,000. It's unlikely that there's going to be enough pull with demographics to make senators or whoever be able, policymakers to be able to stand up and pay attention on this one.
Well, and Colorado, of course, the grit of the gas industry anyway. Governor Jerry Hickenlooper was financed into office by the gas industry in 2010.
What a surprise, Ian. What a surprise.
Speaks volumes.
Oh, no. Of course. Other little things from this study is that the emission inventory points to NGD, non-conventional gas development, contributing 5 times more than any other area, and 10 times more total VOCs. So that's the whole volatile organic compounds, other than biogenic sources. So biogenic means organic decay. So plants, shallow, remains of detritus from plants, forests, animal carcasses, that sort of. So in essence, we're talking that this is the single biggest contributor in that area of these potentially horrendously harmful compounds, doing massive damage not only to the community now, but every generation future to come on.
And this is what the British government wants to unleash on the people of this country in a much more densely populated environment than Utah or Colorado. Bear, we've got to take a short break. We're going to take a short break and then we'll be right back with you. And welcome back to part 3 of episode 14 of Fracking Nightmare. So I'm speaking with Bear, who is going to be a regular contributor to the programme. He's going to be our technical expert. And today we're discussing air quality and air pollution from hydraulic fracturing. So Bear, in part 2, we walked through the total lack of academic reports and studies on this subject, but you have actually managed to trawl just a few, and it is actually shocking how few our politicians and supposed industry experts are hanging their hat on, when in reality, of course, there's really no regulatory controls in place whatsoever and no studies upon which to base them.
I know, totally, Ian. I mean, it's what really shocked me is I was looking into fracturing for the groundwater. That's my area of expertise. I did my dissertation in hydrogeology, so groundwater systems. And this was just something I looked at as an aside when I was looking through, trying to get an idea of the whole picture. And it still boggles me at this moment that I mean, what from earlier, this is the only health impact assessment done globally regarding air emissions. You know, it really is terrifying in many ways that our government's so willing to push it through.
What you've shared with us so far, one would think that would be And welcome back to part 3 of episode 14 of Fracking Nightmare. So I'm speaking with Bear, who is going to be a regular contributor to the programme. He's going to be our technical expert. And today we're discussing air quality and air pollution from hydraulic fracturing. So Bear, in part 2, we walked through the total lack of academic reports and studies on this subject, but you have actually managed to trawl just a few, and it is actually shocking how few our politicians and supposed industry experts are hanging their hat on, when in reality, of course, there's really no regulatory controls in place whatsoever and no studies upon which to base them.
I know, totally, Ian. I mean, it's what really shocked me is I was looking into fracturing for the groundwater. That's my area of expertise. I did my dissertation in hydrogeology, so groundwater systems. And this was just something I looked at as an aside when I was looking through, trying to get an idea of the whole picture. And it still boggles me at this moment that I mean, what from earlier, this is the only health impact assessment done globally regarding air emissions. You know, it really is terrifying in many ways that our government's so willing to push it through.
What you've shared with us so far, one would think that would be enough to effectively shut it down. You
would think that as well, especially as you say in such a densely populated area as England, because I mean, one thing I'll just say is that part of that study I was reading is that the study itself goes on to say that you cannot apply the things from this study to any other fracking site because of the unique features. I mean, that's damning enough as itself, that the one study itself says that what they're trying to do in this country and all over Europe, the world in many cases, you can't do it because the study and the information is not there to be able to verify if it is or it isn't a hazard.
Exactly, and in fact that's what they're relying on, that the other studies aren't there, so that basically they say, well, there's no evidence to suggest that there's going to be any problem until too late.
Yeah, I know, which is why we have to be so proactive as we are trying to fight this, because if we let this go through, you know, we're going to lose any form of habitable biosphere for ourselves very, very quickly, I feel.
Absolutely. So carry on there. You were going to think through some of the limitations that are associated with this issue.
Yeah, well, the one study, I've been talking about earlier, Colorado in 2012. These are some of the limitations that they mentioned. You know, this is from the article itself. So the article realizes that it isn't gaining enough information, it doesn't have enough of an overview to be able to actually even be a definitive study in itself. One thing it says is that there wasn't enough data available on all the chemicals emitted during the well development process, maybe weren't told what they were. And to stress about it as well, this only deals really with VOCs, the volatile organic compounds. It doesn't do any of the particulate matter, the pollution from the vehicles or the generators that are used on site. It's a very narrow focus study. Other stuff it said is that as it says that it's the benzenes, the toluenes, the xylenes. I say that the study can't be done because of different topography and geography. The chemicals are different as well, depending on what you're putting into the ground and also the quality of the methane you're pulling up. You know, if it's sour methane, this automatically affect it as well. So it just, every time you look through this, you realise that there just isn't the knowledge there to be able to substantiate, even if they would help, what potentially they could be. Because each station, each fracking site would have to be individually monitored, individually analysed, and then this would have to be put into an interconnected network of monitoring stations across, say we're talking about Britain, across the whole country, to be able to build up what is happening. But by the time they're doing that, it's already too late, as you say. By the time that they've got monitoring, they're already, this story in the atmosphere, it'll already be in people's communities, and it will already be in their body systems.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to move on now to, and this is another thing that irks me. I discovered another study about ozone. It was called the UNTAR Winter Ozone and Air Quality Study, done in 2012 as well. Now, when I was reading through the Public Health Foundation document, they said there'd only been one that they could base any of their emissions on, when this study actually existed as well. So I find it very hard to believe that poor old me, non-finance home research, was able to find this in about half of looking through it. So once again, I think this shows the lack of real evidence gathering and real research that has been done, even based on these paper studies, you know.
Sure.
But I mean, the first figures out of these were damning when I read them. This study had an air emissions inventory commissioned for itself for the study purpose. And I will just stress as well that over an 8-week period, this study, it wasn't done over a year. This second study was only for a small period of time. That they identified that 98 to 99% of all volatile organic compounds were emitted from non-conventional gas development, and 51 to 61% of all nitrogen oxides, the ozone precursor gases, were emitted from NGD as well. So I mean and this is in an area, once again, it's a restricted geographical range, but I mean the contribution that this industry is having to the environment and people's health is so worrying. And there's other things I've picked out of this as well. The study, even though I say it was over a period, it doesn't include several major installations that came online during the report, which is understandable. But what I found very, very worrying is of the majority of the 90 or so smaller stations were not included. So only the 20 major compressor stations, and when I say a compression, once gas is being extracted, it gets sent to a compressor station, which puts it on and enables it to be moved on to where it's needed, to the depot, refinery, whatever it is. And so, in essence, the figures I'm about to, even though they're quite worrying as they are, they could double in relation to the actual emitted VOCs and nitrogen oxide area. So I'll just give you these figures. The compressor stations, and this is individual, were found each to produce, and originally, by the way, also industry figures that were given for this were about half this value, and this is from the study's value. So it says a study that the original were very optimistic, shall we say, from the shale gas industry. But each individual compressor station is producing 130 tons a month of volatile organic compound and 390 tons a month of nitrogen oxides. The total emissions from the compressor station in the area were, and as I said, this is only for the 3 major ones, we're missing 90 minor installations. By the way, the reason they're not declared is because of government legislation. They don't have to declare them. This isn't the fact that they've just omitted them. They don't have to declare this by law, which I find absurd as well. As I say, so for the year, for VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that was 1,608.9 tons. And for nitrogen oxide, that's 4,938.5 tons. And to give you some context, they also had a study done of the car emissions for the entire time. Total car emission, 1,328 tons of nitrous oxide and 847 tons of organic compounds. So in case, I mean, 4 times the amount of nitrogen oxide and double the amount of VOCs, but once again, you could double those other figures. So you're talking 4 times the amount of volatile organic compounds, so benzene, toluene, xylene, and 1,000 tons of ozone-emitting chemical into the atmosphere. And so, I mean, and this in itself as well, this study doesn't take into anything like abandoned wells, abandoned facilities, plugged wells, or anything like that. So even though the figures are quite shocking, once again, they're probably not telling in any way, shape, or form the whole story.
So, Bear, as a scientist, if you were now advising the British government based on this limited research on the documented acid pollution caused by fracking, what would your be?
No way. Simple as. I mean, a scientist.
I think you probably might have an expletive in there as well.
Yeah, I was being
No
euphemistic
fracking.
for
No
the show.
fracking.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe in complete blanket of stopping action of carbons. They're very useful to us, and I don't believe we should be using fuel. I think they've got a lot more uses, industrial processes that are essential to our modern society, for plastics and polymers for use in things like the medical industry. I think plastic, these things have a lot of much better uses they could be being used for, rather than cheap fuel and cheap energy run, because we do have the alternative technologies. And to see that the thing is, with hydrogen, with the arguments that put forward, people talk about the groundwater pollution. This is something that may or may not happen. In my opinion, I believe it will happen, the way that they can predict it. This is going to happen. There is no way that you can get away from the fact that these gases are produced in exceedingly large amounts from the fracking process. Even from this one study, that has been proved. And let's say 2 studies. And so, in my eyes, there is no with a duty of care to my electorate, with a true responsibility as one human being to another, authorize something where I know that one of the most lethal leukemia causing compounds is going to be increased by 10, 20, 30, 100 times potentially in certain areas. It's sheer madness, and to me, it smacks of no care for the British people from our supposedly elected government.
But it is, as I have said many times over the past 13 weeks or so, it is cognitive dissonance, because the evidence is there. All you have to do is look for it. But these guys, even if they look for it, they don't see it, because they are so vested in the party line that they just look at themselves, and regardless of the consequences. Bear, if I was having a discussion, it was in West Kirby, where of course they're under threat of underground coal gasification, which we're going to get a little bit later in the show. And, I was talking to the prospective Parliament Labour there, Margaret Greenwood, and, I made the observation. I said, if I was Cameron right now, I'd be looking for an exit strategy. I would be asking my advisors to come up with an exit strategy and come up with one pretty quick, because he, along with Lord John Brown, of course, have this hole for themselves. They're going hell for leather. Yet every single poll that is taken around the country is showing that there's an increasing rejection of unconventional industry by the electorate. We're now, 18 months, not even, from the next election, and the awareness of the dangers associated with this industry increasing at such a phenomenal rate. I can see from September onwards, when the hustings really kick in, how he can continue to be pushing forward this agenda.
It seems like madness to believe that on this platform there's any chance of them getting re-elected. I mean, it's obvious to me that public opinion has turned, and from the solidarity marches down at Barton ended, it's obvious that this is a whole demographic of British society, young and old, rich and poor. Everybody is worried about this. Nobody's been given any information, and the government, if the of the government, as you say, ploughing ahead without obviously showing any care or concern about people that they're one meant to represent, but B, are going to elect them or not elect them in the next election, it's very surprising. I mean, all I can think that the kickbacks must be immense for them to be going down this route, to be honest, because there's no other way I could think that anybody would do that.
Well, it's funny you should say, because that was actually some of the comments I was getting from the people that attended the meeting in West Kirby on the Wirral yesterday, and I will state that this is only hearsay based on speaking to people there. But apparently, Wirral Council has a hell of a reputation for being corrupt, and brown paper envelopes apparently are the currency of the day. Well, clusters are looking to move into the area, so it would seem that perhaps Clough Industry are already starting to pack those brown paper envelopes, because when you look at underground coal gasification, that is fracking's ugly sister.
Oh, good Lord. I mean, as soon as you realise they're setting fire to subsurface geology, I mean, in what world? I mean,
With no way of controlling
I know.
it. I mean, we really are dealing with sociopathy.
Yeah, in many ways we are, indeed.
And these people certainly do not have our or anybody else's best interests at heart, and one can only wonder really what goes through their minds, although I think we've already established that they're more interested in what goes through their
I think that's very true indeed.
Bear, it's been wonderful on the show today, and I'm only sorry that we weren't able to do this last week. But any thoughts? What are you going to be sharing with us next week?
Well, I'm going to continue my studies into the effects on groundwater, but I'm one section that I've picked up on that I'll probably look at next week, because I think it's going to take me a while till I can do my final groundwater situation. The radon gas and the radiation problems, because I've once again found a distressing lack of information on the potential radon the radon content in the Bowland shales and the black shales in England. So I'm going to do a bit more research, because I found a bit more from this other article from Public Health Foundation, and see what I can pull up to maybe give some accurate figures, or at least some comparable figures from the US of the potential amount of radiation that might be pulled out of the fracking industry if it ever does get going in the UK.
Well, I shall look forward to discussing that with you
Yeah,
next
so
week.
shall I.
Thank you so much. You have a good week,
You
my
too.
friend.
You too, Ian.
Take care now. Bye. Well, that was Bear, and as you can see, and I'm sure you will agree, Bear is going to be a tremendous asset to Fracking Nightmare and to raising awareness right across the wider community, and helping to ensure that we prevent this abomination from being unleashed beneath this densely populated island. Now, on Saturday, I was actually heading back towards Barton Moss when I caught word of a public meeting that was to be held that afternoon in West Kirby on the northwest coast of the Wirral. And this was a public meeting that had been called by the Parliamentary Labour Party candidate for Wirral West. And she called the meeting to gauge local reaction to the plans for underground coal gasification beneath the Dee estuary. suffice to say, as far as I'm concerned, underground coal gasification, the setting light of coal seams beneath the surface, is fracking's ugly sister, and that's putting it politely. Anyway, I headed up to that meeting, and unfortunately I arrived just as the meeting was closing, but I did take the opportunity to speak to a number of people that had attended the meeting, and also to Margaret Greenwood herself. And let's have a listen to what these people have to say. Margaret, you're up here in the northwest of England, and you called the meeting today to discuss underground coal gasification with the community. What motivated you to call this meeting?
Well, really, this came about because one of the local Labour Party members brought the issue to our attention. A UCG licence has been granted for the D estuary. That happened a year ago, and it's a 5-year licence. We're concerned because of the risks to the marine environment and to what would happen on land. So I felt it was important that we sort of initiated some sort of public conversation about this, so that local people could be informed, that they could do their own research, and that they could start to understand what the implications of this might be.
It was great to have a meeting for the first time. It was great to see so many different people from all walks of life really opposed to this. The first meeting wasn't as informed as I thought they should have been. The general public themselves seemed to be a lot more informed than our councillors did.
What I hope comes out of today's meeting is that there's greater public awareness of this, that there's greater public awareness and that there's media coverage of the new well, it's not a new technology, but of the technology that you know, there's interest in deploying here. It is a conditional licence, so the firm that have got that licence will have to apply for other permissions. So one of the other things that I want to come out of it, we in the Labour Party have a local action group here working on this, but obviously it's a lot of detailed information and knowledge that we need. But I'm hoping that we can find out, you know, where the points are that people can have impact on the decision-making process. So what those other permissions are, what the time frames for those things are, and how people can make best representation to make sure that they can protect the local environment in the way that they want to.
And they did say that all three parties were against it. If that was the case, then we should have the information that they have to be so against it. They should come equipped to the meetings, you know, and say, well, these are the reasons why Wirral is against it. And if they are against it, you know, why can't we just say straight out, like, a no? Haven't they done that in Australia, where the communities have just turned around and gone, we're a frack-free zone, or you know, don't even bother coming here? If that was the case with the Wirral MPs, then why are we here?
I think, you know, anybody who's in government has to look at the whole agenda. I can totally understand a local MP wanting to defend the quality of life of people in their own area. But also, I think, you know, we're at sort of quite an interesting time in the development of energy within the country, aren't we? So my personal view is that I'm very concerned about the environmental risk. That, for me, is the really top priority here, because we've got a site of special, an SSI site, you know, protected site at Hilbury Island, which is a fantastic kind of natural resource. The D estuary has got international protections in terms of conservation, but then that, you know, how that then plays out in relation to the need to acquire energy, you know, we don't know what the legal situation would be there. So, you know, my real concern is around the local environment and the impact of that. This isn't an industrial environment, you know. Wirral West isn't an industrial area. It's a residential area. It's somewhere people come to because they're interested in bird life, they're interested in the seals at Hilbury. So, you know, my priority is making sure that what local people want gets heard, and that they are able to input into that process.
I'd never heard of it before. I'd heard of fracking, and so I did some research, and I'm still very upset that nobody in the local area knows about it, and that's why I came along today. I certainly told a lot of people about it as well, make people aware of what's going on.
Well, it's been very informative. I didn't know very much about it beforehand. It's been really informative. It's been a really good turnout today. I'm really pleased that everyone's turned up. There seems to be a lot of opposition to it already. I just hope that we can get more public interest involved with it now and make people more aware of what's going to be going on in the area, because it'll be an absolute devastation if this comes to the Wirral. It'll be a travesty, really will be.
I think everybody needs to be aware of what's going on before it's too late.
So what are you going to do from now?
Well, basically I'm going to go away and I'm going to carry on spreading the word, and I'm going to send some emails and find out who to actually try and organise a group as well. You know, we need a local group. And also, as brought up at the meeting, this is going on in other areas of the UK. Maybe we can all work together.
All sorts of people live in West Kirby. You know, it's not just a very prosperous place, but you've got lots of people retired here, lots of people who've lived here all their lives. You get off the train at West Kirby and you can smell tranquility. It's lovely, you know, and lots of people in Merseyside use that as a resource. People come on the trains from Liverpool to go to Hilbury to enjoy that island and that experience of being able to walk out across the sand, to go to an island, to see seals. When you started off in Liverpool city centre at the start of your journey, that's something quite magical, and I think it's something we do need to protect, because, you know, it's not just about, you know, the bottom line, it's about quality of life, and it's not just the people who live here who benefit from it, it's the wider Merseyside region people benefit from it. And I'm very concerned as well, because I'm sure, you know, somebody who's never been here looking at a map might just think, oh, you know, it's just part of the northwest, how interesting can it be? But actually, to us, it's massively important because it's such a beautiful place. So it is a massively important resource. It's not just an extra add-on, I don't think. I think it's integral to the character of the place.
Indeed.
We have these wonderful natural places, and it's very important we protect them.
So after that meeting, I spent an hour or so speaking with Margaret Greenwood and her advisors, and it's very clear that they absolutely understand that the strength of feeling amongst the West Wirral constituents is that underground coal gasification is not an option. Certainly not in an area that is regarded as having natural outstanding beauty. So those areas of the country that are being targeted potentially for underground coal gasification, like South Wales, like the Bristol Channel area, or down the Northumberland coast, and of course the Dee estuary. It's very important that those communities take a look at the threat that this industry brings to their environment. Now, just before I say goodnight, I just want to draw your attention to one small detail that coincidentally occurred on the day when the police failed to turn up to escort the iGas convoys into the well site there. At 10 o'clock that morning, David Cameron was due to participate in a live debate on BBC Radio Lancashire with Tina Louise. And Tina Louise has been my guest on a number of previous editions of Fracking Nightmare. Now, Tina Louise is certainly a very feisty and very informed debater. And certainly I am extremely grateful that I'm batting on the same team as Tina Louise. Well, it is my suspicion that David Cameron was anticipating that the lack of police presence at Barton Moss would lead to the protection community running riot, locking on all over the convoy, and making it clear to the British electorate that the police presence was essential to protect the convoys from these eco-extremists. How sad then, David, that you didn't get that opportunity, that the protection community escorted the iGas convoy to the gate peacefully. You delayed the debate until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe hoping that the protectors would then run riot as they escorted the convoy out, but once again you were disappointed. So now you have postponed the debate for a further week. Call it a hunch, David, but I don't think that debate's going to take place anytime soon. And as I said earlier in the programme, if I was in your shoes, mate, I'd be looking for an exit strategy. I'd be looking to get Lord John Brown and Francis Maude off the case and looking for a way in which you might just be able to salvage a little piece of your political credibility. It may only be a little piece, but the reality is if you try and push through this agenda, then the British people will have zero respect for you or your party, and for that matter, any other party that supports this abomination. Thank you, good night, see you next week.
2 million wells worldwide. Not a single person has been poisoned by contaminated groundwater. Not a single building has been damaged by an earthquake.
nation. Every woman, every man, let's rise, no hesitation. Feel the energy. They say we're in a crisis, but poison and water is not the remedy. We got to make a stand. We want clean water, clean air. This is how we can save it. Man, so I hope you understand. We will never sell our future for 100 grand. So in 100 years, we'll look back. What did we achieve? No fracks, a good frack. What do we believe? Too late, there's no take backs. Air and water gone. Time doesn't wait, fam. So please, we need to mobilize communities and fight this disease. So in the future our children can breathe, laugh, play and drink water from the streams, I believe.
How dare you lie on live television? There has been one high-volume hydraulic fracturing operation in this country and it caused earthquakes. How dare you lie on live television?
We don't want you fracking round here, so we stand in resistance without fear. Investors, you better get another plan. How this is our earth, we ain't got another land. Francis Lord John and the other man, Nick Clegg, Ed Davey and then Cameron. Show us the colour of your belly, get it yellow out. You stole the power, now you're selling out. That's why power to the people's what we bellow out. Fracking people, forget what you've read about. Throw your telly out, finish, they're lying. There's no social license, arise like a lion. The resistance is building, stronger than I am, feeling freer by the minute. Freedom's what I'm crying. I ain't got modular and all. We protested your prep and we'll resist when you start.
Drilling has been stopped after an earthquake. The 1.5 magnitude quake is the second in the area in 2 months.
This industry is a danger to human health and to the environment. It has no social license. We stand by and watch corporate greed destroy our planet. This affects everyone. Whether you're on the boat, rise up. If you're in your 9 to 5, rise up. Everybody everywhere, rise up. We will fight them in the fields. We'll fight them with social media. We'll fight them in the courts. And we'll fight them with our bodies. We'll see you on the front line. We'll see you